A raise? You should be grateful we even keep you. Ronald Croft laughed, his voice bouncing off the conference room walls of Midwest manufacturing specialists. I sat perfectly still in my chair, the quarterly performance review folder open before me. I had 9 years of exceptional evaluations in that folder. 9 years without a single pay increase. Your request is rather ambitious, Julian. Sylvia Croft, the chief financial officer and Ronald's wife, tilted her head with exaggerated sympathy. Ambitious considering current market conditions. The leadership team exchanged knowing glances around the table. 8 people who collectively made decisions about my worthwhile, knowing nothing about what I actually did for them. I developed the calibration method that increased our production precision by 43%, I said, keeping my voice steady. Production time was cut in half, saving this company millions of dollars annually. The Eastbrook contract alone, which we secured through aggressive negotiation tactics, was won because of my technical specifications. I reminded them, though Jeffrey Briggs, our vice president of sales, interrupted me immediately, claiming it was a pure sales victory. But we all knew the client had rejected our initial bid until my technical calibrations proved we could meet their aerospace requirements. I have trained 18 junior technicians since I started, I continued, refusing to let them dismiss my contributions. I have personally troubleshot critical issues for our top clients. The European expansion would have collapsed if I had not spent weeks rewriting the calibration sequences. It was a team effort. Julian, Ronald Croft cut in, drumming his fingers on the polished surface of the table. Everyone pulls their weight here. My salary has not changed since I was hired 9 years ago, I replied. I am only asking to align my compensation with current industry standards. Ronald leaned back, exchanging amused glances with the other executives. Industry standards are for average contributors, Julian. If you want extraordinary compensation, you must show us extraordinary results. My chest tightened. The calibration breakthrough I had pioneered had generated massive profits. Last quarter's report, which I was not supposed to have seen, attributed a 34% profit increase directly to my proprietary technical innovations. The numbers speak for themselves, I said, sliding the market research documents across the table. Engineers with my qualifications and output are compensated at least 40% higher. Ronald did not even glance at my carefully prepared documents. He simply pushed them back. A raise? You should be grateful we even keep you, he repeated, his smile dripping with arrogance. My name is Julian Vance, and until 4 weeks ago, I was the lead calibration engineer at Midwest Manufacturing Specialists. Not that you would know it from my official title, which remained technical specialist, despite my responsibility expanding year after year. I grew up taking apart every mechanical device in our house, much to my parents' dismay. By the age of 12, I could reassemble a vacuum cleaner with improved suction. At 16, I modified my high school's physics laboratory equipment to achieve measurements their budget could never afford. My engineering professors in college called me Precision Julian, a nickname that followed me into my professional life. When I joined Midwest, I was grateful for the opportunity. The company manufactured high-end industrial equipment for sectors ranging from aerospace to medical technology. My starting salary of $65,000 seemed reasonable for a recent graduate, and the promise of future growth kept me motivated through long hours and demanding projects. The calibration breakthrough came during my second year, when I was 40 years old. For months, I had noticed tiny inconsistencies in our testing apparatus, variations that others dismissed as acceptable margin. But in precision manufacturing, those margins represented the difference between excellence and catastrophic failure. I spent weekends experimenting with alternative methods, using my own equipment purchased piece by piece from my modest salary. The solution came to me at 3 o'clock in the morning. A hybrid calibration sequence that integrated digital measurements with mechanical fine-tuning in a sequence nobody had ever tried before. When I demonstrated my method to the engineering team, the results were immediate and undeniable. Precision improved dramatically while cutting calibration time from 8 hours to just under 4. The production floor implemented my technique within a week, and suddenly our products outperformed every competitor in accuracy tests. Orders increased, quality complaints disappeared, and client retention hit 100% for the first time in company history. I waited for recognition, a promotion, a bonus, or even just an acknowledgement in the company newsletter. Instead, in the next quarterly meeting, my innovation was presented as our new proprietary method with no mention of my name. Ronald Croft took questions from impressed board members, while I sat silently in the back row, ignored and forgotten. This is how business works, my colleague Teresa Albright told me afterward. Individual recognition is not how you advance here. Be patient, Julian. So I was patient. I trained new hires on my calibration method. I documented every step so production would not suffer during my rare sick days. I answered calls from clients at midnight when their equipment needed emergency adjustments. I kept my head down, believing that eventually my dedication would speak for itself. But the reality of corporate greed was far more stubborn than I anticipated. The European expansion came in my 6th year, when I was 44. Regulatory standards in Europe differed significantly from American requirements, and the first shipment of our machines failed local inspections spectacularly. The expansion team was in a massive crisis, with millions of dollars in equipment sitting in warehouses, completely unusable. Julian, we need solutions, not explanations, Ronald Croft had told me during the emergency meeting. Either fix this, or we will find someone who can. I canceled plans for the next 6 weekends. My relationship with Brenda ended when I missed her brother's wedding, a loss that still stung, but I was consumed by the challenge. I redesigned critical components, revised testing protocols, and created new calibration standards specifically for European requirements. By the 8th week of nonstop work, our equipment passed inspection, with scores exceeding local manufacturers. The company celebrated the successful expansion with a major party that I could not even attend. I was stuck on a video call with German technicians, walking them through the new implementation protocols. Each year, my performance reviews praised my dedication and technical expertise. Each year, my compensation remained completely unchanged. When I raised the issue, I was told the company was restructuring, consolidating resources, or emphasizing team achievements over individual contributions. Meanwhile, I watched newer employees, usually younger men with half my experience who were friends of Jeffrey Briggs, negotiate starting salaries higher than what I was making after 6 years. That is just how negotiation works. Human Resources explained when I inquired about the discrepancy. Your performance is valued, but we cannot disrupt internal equity by adjusting established employees. That was the moment I stopped asking and started applying elsewhere. The offers came quickly. My reputation in the industry had spread, despite the company's best efforts to brand my innovations as their collective achievements. I declined 4 positions out of misplaced loyalty, holding on to the hope that Midwest would recognize my value. Then, an unexpected email arrived in my personal inbox. Your calibration method has revolutionized equipment precision standards across the sector, wrote Eleanor Thorne, director of the Industrial Certification Authority. We are creating a new position, Chief Innovation Officer, to modernize certification protocols across the industry. Based on your contributions to the field, we would like to discuss your interest in leading this initiative. The Industrial Certification Authority sets the standards that every manufacturer in our sector must meet to sell their products. Their certification is the absolute difference between market access and bankruptcy. Their offer included a starting salary of $180,000, plus the authority to shape industry practices. I met with Eleanor Thorne for dinner, intending only to gather information. 3 hours later, surrounded by empty plates and pages of notes about potential improvements to certification standards, I realized I had found my path forward. I need 2 weeks to properly transition my current projects. I told her as we parted. Take the time you need, Eleanor replied. We have waited years for someone with your vision. A few more weeks will not matter. I decided to give Midwest manufacturing specialists one final chance. I prepared extensive documentation showing my contributions, market salary data, and a modest request that would still leave me underpaid but would acknowledge my value. I scheduled my annual review early, arriving with hope that rationality might prevail. Instead, I got laughter, dismissal, and the mocking words of Ronald Croft. As I walked back to my workstation after that meeting, a strange, absolute calm settled over me. 9 years of doubt about my worth dissolved in an instant. Their reaction was not a negotiation tactic. It was a revelation of how they truly saw me. I was disposable to them, despite being entirely irreplaceable. I sat at my computer and sent a brief email to Eleanor Thorne, accepting the offer. That evening, I drafted my resignation letter. It was 2 paragraphs, professional and concise. I mentioned no grievances and made no accusations. I simply stated that I would be departing in 2 weeks to pursue another opportunity and would ensure all my projects were properly transitioned. I slipped the letter into an envelope and placed it in my bag. The next morning, I arrived at work at my usual time. I greeted the security guards, prepared my workstation, and began addressing urgent client requests. At precisely 10 o'clock, I walked to the conference room where the leadership team was having their daily briefing. I knocked once and entered. 8 pairs of eyes turned to me with mild surprise. "Julian, we are in the middle of something," Ronald said, annoyed at the interruption. I approached the table silently and placed the envelope in the center. "Thank you for your time," I said, and walked out, closing the door behind me. I did not wait for a reaction. I had work to do, and my time with Midwest was officially counting down. The envelope remained unopened on Ronald Croft's desk for 5 days. I continued working, documenting processes, and training colleagues on aspects of my role that only I understood. No one mentioned my unusual appearance at the leadership meeting, and no one asked about the envelope. On the 5th day, while I was calibrating equipment for our newest aerospace client, my phone began vibrating continuously in my pocket. There were 8 missed calls from Human Resources, 5 from Ronald Croft, and 3 from Sylvia Croft. I turned the device off and finished my calibration routine. I was not going to let their sudden panic disrupt my work. When I returned to my desk, the head of Human Resources was waiting for me. "Julian," she said, her voice lowered to a whisper. "Ronald opened your letter. He is extremely concerned. Can we please talk privately in the conference room?" I followed her to the small conference room where Ronald and Sylvia were already seated, looking uncharacteristically tense. Ronald pushed my resignation letter across the table. "What is this, Julian?" he asked, as though the clearly written document was an insolvable riddle. "My 2 weeks' notice," I replied calmly. "I have accepted another position." "Where?" Sylvia demanded, her eyes narrowing. "I would prefer not to discuss that until I begin my new role," I said. Ronald leaned forward, his demeanor completely transformed from the mockery of our last meeting. "Julian, we may have been hasty during your performance review. Let us revisit your compensation request." "We value your contributions tremendously," the Human Resources head added, trying to smooth things over. "I appreciate that," I said, "but I have already accepted another offer and signed the contract. Whatever they are paying you, we will match it," Sylvia said, her voice strained. I thought about the 9 years of denied requests, of watching less qualified colleagues advance while I remained stationary, of the canceled weekends and midnight troubleshooting. I thought about my innovations being rebranded as company property. "This is not about the money," I said. "Though the financial difference was substantial, it is about finding the right opportunity for my career growth." "We can create a new position," Ronald offered, his hands clasped tightly. "Senior Calibration Director, with a team reporting directly to you." "Thank you, but my decision is final." They continued with escalating offers, promising a 60% raise, a director title, and a permanent seat on the Innovation Committee. The same committee that had rejected my improvement proposals for years. I declined each offer with increasing certainty. The next 2 weeks were surreal. Executives who could never remember my name stopped by my workstation with technical questions, revealing how little they understood about our own products. I documented everything meticulously. I organized calibration procedures, troubleshooting protocols, and client-specific modifications. I created comprehensive training materials for processes I had previously maintained alone, transferring 9 years of accumulated knowledge into files accessible to the entire department. On my final day, I handed over my projects to 3 different engineers, each taking a portion of my responsibilities. My desk took less than 10 minutes to clear. Ronald Croft appeared as I was signing my final paperwork. "This is a mistake, Julian," he said, following me toward the exit. "You are throwing away 9 years of building your career here." I stopped at the security desk and handed over my badge. "Those 9 years provided valuable experience," I said. "I am grateful for that. At least tell us where you are going." Ronald pressed as we reached the lobby. "We should stay in touch." I considered various responses before settling on the simple truth. "The Industrial Certification Authority," I replied. "Today is my last day here, but I do not start there for 4 weeks. I am taking some time off." Ronald's face paled. "In what capacity?" he whispered. "Chief Innovation Officer," I said. Ronald's expression collapsed into panic. He knew, as everyone in our industry knew, that the authority's standards determine which products reach the market. Their certification process could accelerate or destroy a company's future. "We should talk about this," he stammered. "We had 9 years to talk," I replied. "Goodbye, Ronald." I walked through the glass doors, the weight of unappreciated years falling away with each step toward my car. Those 4 weeks between jobs were the first real break I had taken since college. I visited my parents in Wisconsin, hiked trails I had been too busy to explore, and slept without setting an alarm. I declined 20 calls from various Midwest manufacturing numbers and deleted their voicemails unheard. My peace was worth more than their desperation. When my first day at the authority arrived, Eleanor Thorne personally showed me to my office. It was a spacious room with windows overlooking the city, a stark contrast to the shared windowless workstation I had occupied for 9 years. "The certification standards have not been updated in nearly a decade," Eleanor explained during our orientation. "Technology has evolved, but our requirements have not. Your first project is to modernize our precision measurement protocols." I was ready to begin. I spent my first month learning the organizational structure, reviewing current standards, and identifying outdated requirements. By the 8th week, I drafted preliminary revisions that would raise industry standards to reflect current technological capabilities. "These are significant changes, Julian," noted Walter Miller, the technical review director, during our planning meeting. "Some manufacturers will struggle to comply." "Any manufacturer using current best practices will meet these standards," I replied. "The changes primarily affect those using outdated methods or taking shortcuts like ignoring calibration drift over time to save operational costs." Walter nodded slowly. "Exactly like that." I knew Midwest manufacturing specialists routinely extended recalibration intervals to cut costs, a practice I had repeatedly flagged as dangerous. The standards revision process took 4 months of meticulous work, peer reviews, and industry consultations. Throughout this process, I maintained strict professional ethics. I never targeted Midwest specifically or created requirements that only benefited certain companies. The new standards simply reflected what was truly possible with modern technology, precision levels I had personally achieved years earlier. When the updated standards were published, my phone rang within hours. "Julian, it is Teresa Albright from Midwest," she said, her voice tense. "Have you seen what the authority just released?" "I wrote what was released, Teresa," I replied calmly. "These precision requirements and calibration schedules are impossible," she claimed. "They are not impossible," I said. "I implemented similar standards at Midwest 3 years ago, but they were never adopted because of cost concerns." Silence stretched across the line. "Our certification renewal is due next month," she admitted. "We are nowhere near compliant." "The authority offers implementation consulting for companies transitioning to the new standards," I said, reciting our official policy. "I can refer you to that department." Teresa declined, and I later learned Midwest had hired an external consultant at premium rates. 2 weeks later, my assistant Fiona notified me that Midwest had requested an expedited pre-assessment review. The review was assigned to one of our senior inspectors to maintain my professional distance. The inspector's report arrived on my desk with a large red flag notification. Midwest's equipment failed to meet the new standards by significant margins. Their calibration procedures were outdated, and their quality control documentation was completely inadequate. I forwarded the report to the certification committee with standard recommendations for improvement. 3 days later, Ronald Croft called my direct line. "Julian," he began without greeting, We need to discuss these new certification requirements. All communication regarding certification must go through official channels, I replied. This is not about implementation, Ronald snapped. These standards are clearly designed to target our processes. This feels personal. The standards apply equally to all manufacturers, I said. Many companies are already in compliance. You know exactly what you are doing, he accused. You are using your position to punish us for not giving you that raise. I let his words hang in the air for a moment. Ronald, I am recording this call as per authority policy for all certification discussions. Would you like to rephrase your statement for the record? He hung up immediately. Midwest's formal certification review came due while I was presenting at an international standards conference in Vienna. The committee evaluated their application without my input. Their findings were clear: provisional certification only, with mandatory compliance checks every 30 days. In industry terms, this was a massive blow. Provisional status carried limitations on new contracts and required disclosures to existing clients. For a company that had enjoyed automatic renewals, thanks to my behind-the-scenes corrections, this was a reputational crisis. Upon my return, I found 35 messages from Midwest executives. I responded with a single email directing them to official channels, copying our ethics compliance officer. The industry summit 8 months later highlighted how dramatically the standards had shifted. My keynote presentation on precision requirements drew attendees from 4 continents. In the front row sat Midwest's leadership team, including Ronald and Sylvia Croft, taking notes with intense focus. During the networking reception, Jeffrey Briggs approached me, a champagne glass in hand. "Impressive presentation, Julian," he said. "We have hired 5 specialists to implement the new standards, but progress is challenging." "Quality improvement is always a journey," I replied. "We have invested nearly $9 million in equipment upgrades," Jeffrey continued. "Ironically, these are the same upgrades you requested in your last budget proposal." I sipped my water, saying nothing. "The thing is," Jeffrey lowered his voice, "we are still struggling. Ronald wants to meet you privately to discuss consulting opportunities. He is prepared to make it worth your while. Private consulting with entities we certify is strictly prohibited," I stated. "That would represent a conflict of interest." As I turned to leave, he grabbed my arm. "You do not understand. Without full certification, we lose the Eastbrook contract. That is 35% of our annual revenue." I gently removed his hand. "Then I suggest you focus your energy on meeting the standards rather than trying to circumvent them." As I walked away, Sylvia Croft intercepted me. "Julian, you look wonderful," she said with artificial warmth. "We have been restructuring at Midwest, creating a new division focused on precision technology. The board has approved an exceptional compensation package for the right candidate." "Are you offering me a job, Sylvia?" I asked. "We are exploring possibilities with someone who understands our unique challenges," she countered. I smiled politely. "I believe the authorities' guidelines provide realistic timelines for companies committed to quality. Companies that can survive those timelines," she muttered. The statement hung between us, revealing that Midwest was in deep financial trouble. As I walked away, Ronald Croft appeared from a side hallway to intercept me. His usual confident stride diminished to something tentative. "2 minutes, Julian," he said. "That is all I ask." Against my better judgment, I paused. "We made a terrible mistake," he admitted, lowering his voice. "Would you consider consulting for us? Name your price." I studied the man who had laughed at my request for fair compensation and taken credit for my innovations. "I am afraid I am quite grateful for my current position," I replied, echoing his dismissive words. As I stepped around him, he called after me, but I did not look back. For Midwest manufacturing specialists, the reckoning was just beginning. 2 weeks later, industry news reported that Midwest had secured an emergency loan, burning cash to meet certification requirements before losing major contracts. Back at headquarters, my team began the second phase of our standards modernization: transparent attribution protocols. This new framework required companies to properly credit technical innovations to their original developers to recognize individual contributions. "The patent system already does this," argued one board member. "Patents are expensive, time-consuming, and often impractical for process innovations," I explained. Many breakthrough methods are developed by employees who lack resources to patent their work independently, while companies claim these innovations as proprietary. After 3 hours of debate, the board approved the initiative as a voluntary certification enhancement for the first year, becoming mandatory in the second. This voluntary phase would serve my purposes perfectly. That evening, Teresa Albright stood in my office doorway. "Teresa, what are you doing here?" I asked. "I interviewed with your implementation team this morning," she said. "They offered me a position. Things have changed at Midwest since you left. They brought in consultants who blame everyone but leadership, and 3 senior engineers were let go. There is more. They are going through your old files, claiming you deliberately sabotaged documentation. Ronald told the board you orchestrated the new standards specifically to damage them, and they are developing a formal complaint." I smiled slightly. "And yet, they have offered me jobs and consulting contracts repeatedly. They are desperate. The Eastbrook contract is hanging by a thread." The next morning, I received formal notice of the complaint. Midwest alleged that I had weaponized inside knowledge and manipulated certification requirements under the Defend Trade Secrets Act. I forwarded the complaint to our legal team. Proceeding as anticipated. Please implement Protocol 37. This protocol triggered a comprehensive review of all documentation related to standards development. For the next month, the ethics investigation proceeded. 6 weeks after filing their complaint, Midwest requested an urgent meeting with the board. I recused myself but watched via closed circuit. Ronald Croft led Midwest's presentation, projecting confident indignation, claiming that the standards were targeted at them and that I had withheld critical calibration documentation before my departure. The board chair responded with practiced neutrality. "The ethics committee has completed its investigation." The committee representative stood. "Actually, that specific allegation was investigated. Page 62 of our report addresses documentation protocols at Midwest during Mr. Vance's tenure." Ronald flipped to the page, his confidence vanishing. "As you can see," the representative continued, "Mr. Vance maintained exceptional documentation standards. His departure materials included 3,245 pages of technical documentation, 150 training videos, and detailed transition notes. This exceeds standard practices by approximately 420%. The calibration sequences were fully documented in Section 14.2 with cross-references to appendices F through H. Ronald conferred hurriedly with his team, his face flushing as he realized they had been caught. Midwest's allegations collapsed under scrutiny. My revenge was never about creating impossible standards. It was about creating a system where truth could not be buried, where contributions could not be stolen. For 9 years, I had documented everything, maintaining my personal archive that told the true story of innovation at Midwest. 2 days after the failed complaint hearing, Midwest Board announced an internal investigation. Within a week, Ronald Croft and 2 other executives were placed on administrative leave. The Industry Oversight Board initiated a separate investigation into potential securities violations under Rule 10b-5 related to misleading statements about proprietary technologies in their investor communications. 4 weeks later, Sylvia Croft visited my office, looking diminished. "The board asked me to come," she said. "We are facing serious consequences. Our stock has dropped 70%. Eastbrook terminated their contract. The board wants to negotiate. They are prepared to offer public acknowledgement of your contributions, back pay, and naming rights for the calibration method." "Why would I want any of that now?" I asked. "Because without it, Midwest will not survive," she admitted. 400 people will lose their jobs. I considered her words. The attribution framework offers a path forward. Midwest could be among the first to adopt it. That would mean admitting publicly that leadership took credit for work we did not do, she said. "Yes," I replied. "It would mean telling the truth." The following month, Midwest Manufacturing Specialists became the 4th company to adopt the attribution framework. Their implementation included a public reconciliation of innovation credits, acknowledging 32 engineers whose contributions had been stolen. My name led the list with 22 distinct innovations spanning 9 years. Ronald Croft and 3 other executives resigned. The new chief executive officer, promoted from engineering, introduced a transparent compensation structure. Teresa Albright returned to Midwest to lead their attribution compliance team. 8 months later, Midwest received full certification. Their stock price stabilized, and while the Eastbrook contract was gone, new clients attracted by their ethical transformation filled the gap. At the next summit, I presented the final version of the attribution framework, now adopted by over 70% of certified manufacturers. The true revenge was not in leaving Midwest or exposing their practices. It was in creating a world where what happened to me could never happen to anyone else.